Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to show you how to add watercolor to a pen and ink study that I have done previously, and I'll link the original video which has the pen, but what I wanted to show you is how to add watercolor and primarily how to actually mix the flesh tone colors that you might want in portraits. So whenever you're adding flesh tones, it's kind of a hard one to mix, but what you can do is you can add ochre and alizarin together, and that's kind of your base, and then you're going to be adding other colors to it in different variations to get the tone that you like. But just again, always keep in mind that your two core colors for any time you want flesh tones is ochre and alizarin. Sometimes, depending on the tone that you're trying to achieve, people like adding umber and sienna. And other times people add a little bit of ultramarine blue. And what ultramarine does when you're using flesh tones is it kind of tones down the colors, because remember, blue is the complement of orange. So you have kind of an orangey color. If you add some ultramarine to it like that, see, that's really bluish, kind of bluish gray. It will make it look more toned down than if you have the pure colors of just ochre and alizarin. So for this video, what I'm doing is I'm going to actually do the study of these noses in watercolor in two different stages and layers. And so one thing that's really important to remember whenever you're using watercolor is that if you keep going and going in one little area, it tends to get kind of overworked. So it's actually better to paint in layers and let the layers dry in between your stages of painting. And that's how you can kind of like deepen variation of your colors without letting it get overly muddy. So here I'm just adding some purpley shadows to around the nose. And so that's the other thing to think about is when you're thinking about shadows, of course, I already have a lot of shadows from the pen and ink, but one thing that you can think about is what kind of color you might want for your shadows. And you have a lot of leeway here in terms of the kind of colors that you might want to mix up. So you notice here, I have a whole mixture I have everything from ochre to more kind of pink tones and some of the other noses. So you can really be experimental in terms of the colors that you're using, as long as you just kind of remember the core colors that you want to be working with, which again are ochre and alizarin. So here, by adding some of a darker color around the nose, what ends up happening is it kind of helps the nose sort of lift off and make it look more like the nose is advancing. So that's another thing that you can do. Don't just think about the nose itself, but think about the area around the nose, which gives it more dimension. Okay, so this is the second layer. And so as you can see, like once you are going in with your second layer, you can do a lot to deepen some of the shadows and just make it more visually interesting, and it'll make it look more realistic, because anytime you look at somebody's face, you'll notice that it's not just like one color. It's sort of like the face will pick up different slight shadows. And so if you try to just use one color completely in the whole entire like face, if you're painting a face or nose or whatever, it won't look as realistic as if you use a few different colors in your painting. So here with this nose, I'm adding a little bit more of ochre to the nose, and just put a little bit of color down and then bring it out with your brush. Don't have your brush with too much water on it. That was sort of like a mistake that I was doing at first, where I realized that I had too much water on my brush. So a little bit of water actually goes a pretty long way. And if you do realize that you put too much water down, what you can do is sort of like dry off your brush a little bit and then use the brush to lift back up, kind of almost like scooping some of the water off it. So water control is an important facet of watercolor, and something that, generally speaking, people are more likely to put too much water, I think, on their brush than too little. It's usually pretty obvious if there's too little. So as you can see in all of these little nose studies, I'm going back over it with a lot of different colors. So it's like, one started with purple and now I'm adding more ochre. Another one started with ochre and I'm maybe adding a little bit of other, fleshy type tones. So, and again, going back around, under the nose, adding some color there makes it a little bit more interesting as well. If you're new to the channel and enjoyed this tutorial, please hit the subscribe button and like the video, and leave a comment if you have any questions. I'll see you next time. Thanks again for watching. Bye.